Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Freshly Pressed. Today we have with us Darren Close from Melbourne. Welcome to the show, Darren.
Cheers. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good.
Awesome. Darren is the creator of Killaroo, and I would love for him to introduce himself. Darren, can you tell us about yourself? What got you into comics, and what got you interested in being an artist and a writer?
Sure. Um, my name's Darren Close. I been publishing Killaroo comic books since about 2001. Got into comics when I was in high school, which was a long time ago. And I guess I was always a fan of drawing as a kid, but I didn't have a focus until I discovered comics. In high school, I met a friend of mine called Damien Shanahan, and he was making his own comic books. So I was kind of swept up in what he was doing and how he was doing it, and inspired me to make my own comic books. And yeah, years later, had the character of Killaroo, and really wanted to do sort of like I guess, an Aussie superhero.
Yeah.
I'd read so many American comics, and they're all set in New York or the US, and didn't really feel like Australia was very well represented. So
Mm.
just started there, and yeah, here we are, 25 years later, and I'm still doing it.
That's amazing. It has a like at this point Killaroo already has a history of 20 plus years, so that's amazing. That's so awesome. Tell us a bit more about the character of Killaroo and how did you come about it? Like how did you bring it into existence? And how did you think about it? And yeah, tell us a
Okay.
bit more about it. Yeah.
It started out when I went to university. There was a magazine there that had a comic book or a comic strip in it that I didn't really like that much, and I was feeling a bit cocky and thought, oh, I could probably do better than this, and just came up with the idea. I just pulled something from the news. I think there was a news story about a kangaroo or a joey was found with an arrow sticking out of its neck.
Ooh.
It was found alive, and they basically had to rehabilitate it, pull the arrow out, and so forth. And going back a little further, my mum was a wildlife carer, so I
Mm.
grew up around orphaned um, kangaroos and wombats and koalas and possums and all of that sort of stuff. So I'd always sort of felt a kinship with animals, and when I saw that story, it really made me mad. And I thought,
Mm.
it's a shame this kangaroo couldn't fight back.
Mm.
And I kind of took a version of that story, and I pretended it was uni students that were the ones that had killed it or shot it through the neck. And yeah, I just created a character called Killaroo who
Ah.
took his revenge on those students that had put an arrow through its neck. But it never really went much further than that. Like, I didn't publish any other stories. It was just published in the university magazine, and I kind of left it after that. But years later, I started a website called Oz Comics, which had a large message board community, sort of all pre-Facebook, pre-social media,
Yeah.
and just met an awful lot of people who were either had made Australian comic books, or we're in the process of making them. And I thought, maybe I can dust off this Killaroo character from uni and do something with him. And that's essentially what happened. Is I just approached some of the other artists on that message board and said, "Look, I've got this character. Would you like to draw a story? What ideas would you have for that character?" And I essentially let them run riot with it. Like some of them, John Sommeriva was one of them, and he had the idea of skate
Mm.
punk Killaroo. So
Ah.
his version, or his story, had Killaroo riding a skateboard. Um, and another one was just him in a bar. I think I'd been a big fan of Sin City and sort of like the strip club kind of story that Marv had in that. And I thought, well,
Mm.
let's set
Mm.
a Killaroo story in that. So they weren't really a definitive version of the character. It was just different artists' interpretation and ideas. And it was just, if you think of DC's Elseworlds, if you like, it was just a whole bunch
Mm.
of different stories featuring a kangaroo mutant kind of thing. And it wasn't until years later, I think around 2010, um, that I was talking to Ryan Wilton, who's an artist who drew the Killaroo Scars book. And
Mm.
he and Daniel Lawson helped me to flesh out a definitive version installation. And I think he was bred essentially to be the ultimate warrior for Australian conditions,
That's
ultimate
amazing.
soldier. But
Yeah.
they terminated the project and he was abandoned out in the outback, and an Aboriginal family took him in, and yeah, just sort of evolved more of a character from
Nice.
there. And from
Nice.
that point, I would create stories following that one. So where he went after that, and then what happened to him after that, sort of thing. And
Yeah,
at this
that's fantastic.
point, after having published a good dozen or more stories, he's kind of fit into the idea of I guess, an urban legend, like a cryptid, sort of like the Loch Ness monster. People don't know if he's real or not. Some people
Yeah.
encounter him, but he's kind of like a weird sort of urban myth,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
that's kind of where most of the stories start, um,
Nice.
from that place.
Nice. That's fabulous. That sounds like a great start as well. And I think that's such a beautiful organic evolution of the character itself, right? Like when you initially conceptualized it, it was something very raw, as a kangaroo exacting revenge on people that put him through that, and then evolved. Like when you see other people's perspectives, then you actually start to see, hang on, I think there's more to this character than what I originally imagined, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He's evolved into something that he wasn't to start with, and I credit all of the artists, writers who've worked with me to sort of build him up to what he is now.
absolutely fantastic. That's a great segue into the campaign. So tell us a bit about the current campaign, Killaroo the Four Horsemen, No Remorse. What
Okay,
is this issue about, and where does it fit into the whole narrative of the
sure.
story?
Well, Stuart Black is the main creator behind this. Um, we've worked together on a. This is actually a sequel to the first crossover that we did, I think back in 2019, where basically I just took my character, and he's got sort of a team. He's got so many different books. Stuart's been making comics probably for as long as I have, but he's published and drawn and written far more than, I think there's about 30 issues now of his comics. Um, which are sort of, I guess, X-Men kind of, super team kind of stuff, but more comedic and
Hmm.
irreverent than taking themselves too seriously. And yeah, I think we met up at a comic meet in Melbourne, and I
Okay.
think we loosely had the idea of working together on something. And I think the next time I spoke to him, he's like, "Oh, here's the first 12 pages." I was like, "The first 12 pages of what?" He's already started. He's just. It doesn't take much for Stuart to just start working on stuff. And yeah, it ended up being. It just kept growing, and it ended up being an 80-page story where I think essentially there were some Aboriginal artifacts that were stolen
Hmm.
by a group of bad guys, and so Killaroo was kind of trying to track them down, and the guys who took it were enemies of his X-Men or his Four Horsemen characters, and they kind of meet in the middle, trying to track down these artifacts, and just sort of went from there. It's I won't call it Shakespeare. It's pretty silly, kind of just big fight scenes and battles and stupid jokes, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. It's not it's not going to win any awards, but I grew up reading Savage Dragon is still one of my favourite books, and that book has just so many different things that'll happen at any one
Yeah.
issue. That unpredictability is something that I treasure about that book, and that's really something that we decided to go for with this. And
Hmm.
yeah, the current campaign is a sequel to that crossover that we did 5 years ago. And again,
Fantastic.
it's another 80 pages. Stuart pretty much just runs with it. Like he had the idea, and my involvement, particularly with this one, is literally just sort of making sure that Killaroo is at least on model to the character that I've established.
Hmm. Hmm.
And every few pages, he would send me the pencils of his Killaroo pictures or panels from the book, and I would ink them.
Hmm.
And I really quite enjoy inking Stuart's work. He's not particularly precious about his line work, and
Yeah.
we just sort of work well together.
That's
So
fantastic.
yeah, it's a fun book. I did a cover for it. I inked the other two covers, and
Hmm.
yeah, just putting it together through the Kickstarter. If you missed the first book, you can buy a bundle which gets you that book, the new book,
Hmm.
and also a little sketchbook that we did that accompanied the first campaign.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
You know, yeah, comic books are essentially like they're medium of entertainment, right? Having fun with comic books should be the first priority.
yeah,
Everything else, obviously, uh, I don't mind a good message in a comic book. That's not too bad. But
yeah,
if it's having fun, it's having fun.
yeah.
That's the point. But yeah, this tell us, yeah, elaborate a little bit more about the rewards. You were just telling about the digital reward
Yeah,
and
there's
the physical ones.
just to
Yeah.
pick up the comic itself to choose from, um, and that starts at $20. And then there's the bundles that you can get all three different covers as a bundle. Um, there's a reward, a cameo reward, where if people back the book, they'll get drawn into it. Like Stuart's almost finished it. There's only, I think, 2 or 3 pages left to draw, and he specifically left those for people who might want to see themselves drawn into a comic. So if people back at that reward, we'll ask them for some photos, and he'll draw them in as one of the bad guys. And you'll probably get killed by Killaroo himself. So
That is so
But,
fascinating. Yeah.
yeah, so that's a nice little reward. There's also T-shirts and even my original art for the third cover,
Oh, that's
which I
amazing.
did a homage to a Jim Lee Wolverine piece.
Oh, wow.
Because
Yeah, that's
the first
fantastic.
book had a homage to a Jim Lee cover as well, which I think
Hmm.
was Uncanny X-Men 268, that famous Captain America, Wolverine, and Black Widow piece. So it made sense to do another one for this book.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
if you wanted to catch up on like the previous Killaroo stories, there's a bunch of there's a bundle there that gets you the whole collection,
That's amazing.
including digital. Like several Killaroo books are now out of print, but I've still got them
Hmm.
all available as PDFs. So you can read the entire series via that way. And similarly with Stuart's, like Stuart's got far more back issues of his stuff than I have. So yeah, there's dozens and dozens of comic books for people who might want to try.
Yep. I've in preparation for this. I yesterday I actually went to my local comic book shop
Yep.
to see if they had a copy of Killaroo because they're actually listed on your website as one of the stockists.
Okay.
Um, they're the comic shop in Liverpool,
Liverpool.
New
Yep.
South Wales. Yeah, they're fantastic folks, by the way.
They're
I
great.
love them.
Did they have
Yeah,
any
yeah.
left? I know they sold most of them.
No, they've sold out. Yeah,
Okay.
so
I'll have to
uh,
give them a yell and restock.
yeah, but yeah, they're fantastic people. And yeah, so yeah, it'll be great to if somebody wants to read the back catalog, it's right there. You can catch up with the whole bundle. Yeah, cool. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
There's a
I think
yeah.
there's less than 2 days left for this campaign. So if people want to check it out, I recommend they do so pretty quickly.
Yes, yes. Also, this video should go up today, so I think that'll give people enough heads up to to back if they want to. Yeah, that's so awesome. Yeah, you briefly talked about some of the comic books that you read growing up. What were some of the books, the comics that you actually loved while
First
growing up?
first comic I ever bought was it was Batman 428, which was 428 or 429. It was the last issue of the Death in the Family storyline where Robin got killed by the Joker,
Mm,
and yeah, so I grew as a kid. I loved the Superman movie. I loved the Batman TV series, and for a comic book that had a Mignola cover, it was drawn by Jim Aparo, and it had Batman and Superman teaming up against the Joker. I was hooked from that point on. Like I didn't have a chance of not getting into comics after that
mm,
introduction. Um, and I got into Spider Man fairly early. I loved Batman and Superman, but I think Spider Man was the main one. I grew up in the country Victoria in the early 90s, and the only comics that were available to us were at newsagents. So every month when the new batch of comics came in, we would skip class just to go down and make sure we got all the new comics because there must have been a couple of collectors in town, and if you
mm.
got in after they had got their books, there was only
Uh,
scraps left. So, but yeah, I was big on the early '90s Marvel. I was buying Superman, Batman with Norm Brayfogle,
mm,
and Spider Man. I collected most of the Spider Man books. And very early on, I started determining that I didn't so much want to follow the characters, I wanted to follow the artists.
mm.
So I really dug what Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson were doing on Spider Man. And if they
Yeah.
went and did another book, I would follow them to that. And then, of course, they co created the Image Comics, and I followed them to that. And
Yeah,
Just a really exciting time to be into comic books at that particular era. And
absolutely.
yeah, I was right there for it. I still collect Savage Dragon today. I have all 270 odd issues.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. I think I had all X-Men comics from the 90s.
Yep,
Uh, Starting from like I have told this hundreds of times that Jim Lee and Chris Claremont were the
yep.
first X-Men that I picked up, and I just fell in love with the characters from there.
It was a glorious period for the X Men. You had Will
I
Sportatio,
agree.
you had Jim Lee. Um, there's some fantastic artists. Even Rob
I
Liefeld.
know.
I have a fondness for the New Mutants and X Force books, and I don't know that they're
Yeah,
that well drawn, but the energy
yeah,
that Rob put into the page just hits you like a freight train.
yeah. I agree. I think uh, talking about Rob Liefeld as an artist, he gets a lot of bad rep for all the anatomy, that the way he draws anatomy, but uh, I think it's more, it's so kinetic, all the art that he has, like you said correctly, it has so much energy.
Yeah,
It's just, it's in your face, and it's like telling you that this is who I am, and it's right there. So that's what I like about it.
yeah,
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yeah, that art, that era was fantastic for like comic book art.
yeah.
Um, the whole, even like Eastman and Kevin Eastman and
So,
the whole TMNT artwork, like from the early days, I
yes,
just absolutely love it. It's so stunning. Like it's so raw, and um,
yeah.
it's so accessible. Sorry,
I
you were
have
saying?
all the deluxe hardcover volumes of Ninja Turtles.
Yeah,
Great stuff.
yeah. And even like you mentioned Sin City, so Frank Miller is one of my favorites as well. Like
Yeah,
yeah, that guy just like he just goes on and does something so different from the norm, that there's just sometimes just almost innovates into something, like he conjures up something so new, just almost like a new form of
it
drawing
is.
covers, and yeah.
He's reinvented himself so many times, and the art
I
form.
know.
You look at, you just go back and if you read Ronin for DC and the art style on that, you just go, "What is this? This is
Exactly.
something different." And then he does Sin City, and again, you sort of like, "Wow, look at this." It's yeah. I always have to check out Frank's newest books for sure.
Yeah. Even his most famous work, The Dark Knight Returns,
Yeah,
right? Like that's one of his most famous works. That the whole art in that book, it almost doesn't look like mainstream comic book. Like it doesn't look like one. It looks like an indie comic book. It's
yeah,
been done that way.
yeah.
It's just the characters are mainstream, and the story itself is so dark, and everything else as well. But the art in it is so indie, and like not something that you would expect in a comic book that you
Yeah,
picked up from DC.
that book knocked me on my ass when the first time I read it. I was just I think having I mentioned Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson. There's lots of big splash pages and stuff like that. And here's a 16 panel grid, which is most of Dark Knight Returns. It's so compressed storyline. There's so much, like it takes you a couple of minutes to read one page,
Mm,
and that's always been something I admired, and I try to use some of that in my stories, where just the 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 way you can depict time between one panel and another.
mm,
And I think there's even silent panels where you just sort of go, okay, so that's
yeah,
it. Just the storytelling beats and the establishing shots, and yeah, it's a masterclass, that book.
absolutely, absolutely. I also, I think, because growing up we did not have access to a lot of British comics. But I always loved. I always wanted to like go and read like Judge Dredd and
Yeah,
2080 and things like that. And when I started buying some of that, I was stunned at how pulpy the art is, like, and like they were always constantly trying to like make the art more grimy
yeah,
for whatever reason. Like all 2080 books look so grimy and so lived in, and like the whole world looks so dirty and everything. But it just gives there's so much texture to those books, to be honest. Like
yeah.
I just love that. Yeah.
I think my first exposure to Judge Dredd was the Batman Judge Dredd crossover with by Simon Bisley.
I
And
have that with me.
that's another book that'll knock you on your ass. Like Simon Bisley, what he can do, it's just stunning. That book.
Yeah. That's fantastic. My wife gifted me the whole
Yeah,
volume. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's one of my favorites as well. Especially like I think the Judge Death storyline. I think Batman gets caught up in. He
that's
goes
right.
to another dimension, and there's Judge Death ruling there instead of Judge Dredd, and he just has to fight him. That's just a crazy story. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Amazing, amazing. Cool. So, carrying this forward, I love to ask this to everyone. What are the top five pop culture things that you like?
Well, I mean, there's one right here, I suppose. Um,
Star Wars. Yeah.
love Star Wars films, not so much. I think Rogue One is my favourite out of the
Mm,
more recent films, and I like the Last Jedi because it has balls. Like I don't know that it nails exactly what they were trying to do, but he basically takes the formula and the director Ryan Johnson and
yeah.
says, "Let's try something different." And I kind of
Yeah.
admire just the literally the balls to do that. You know, to just potentially mess with what happened before and
Yeah.
explore the concepts in there in a different way. And I really dug that. I mean, it has some spectacular visuals on that red planet with the red dust and the white, and obviously that Star Destroyer crash at
Mm,
light speed. Um, there's a lot of stuff that I like there, but obviously a real soft spot for the original trilogy. I remember as a young kid, Star Wars was essentially my babysitter. Like we would go to visit my grandparents, and my grandfather recorded a whole bunch of stuff off TV. He had videos, stacks of videos, and he had Star Wars. And they would basically sit me in front of the TV, put the video in, and press play. And I'd
yeah.
just sit there for the next 2 hours silent. And then I'd say, Mum, it's run out. And then they come back and rewind, hit play, and they're good for another 2 hours. You know,
That's
I just
amazing.
love that stuff. And obviously, then you got Indiana Jones. I loved the Transformers as a kid growing up, culminating in that amazing film.
Mm.
I'm talking about the 1986 film, not anything that's come since. Um, and I get to reminisce a lot with that because my flatmate is hardcore Transformers fan, so we can talk about
Right.
that quite a bit. I don't know, is that enough franchises or pop culture? There's a few there.
Anything goes. Yeah, anything goes. To be fair, like you already talked about a lot of different kinds of comics, and yeah, I think that works.
Yeah, and another pastime which I guess might fit into that is I'm a bit of a poker tragic. I like to play poker,
Okay.
and that really came from watching movies like Rounders and
Mm,
also watching the World Series of poker on TV.
mm.
And it's just a nice social game. I don't get out of the house an awful lot, to be honest. But when there's a pub poker tournament every Sunday night, it's just a way to enjoy the game, meet
Mm.
some new people, and get out of the house. Really, so I find it good for that.
Yeah.
But
No.
yeah, I've got to the point where I've made some Killaroo poker cards or trading
Nice.
deck of cards. That's the Jamie Johnson artwork from the Old Man
Uh,
Rufus cover that I recently published. So
yeah.
yeah,
That's fantastic. No, I think yeah, those cards look amazing, by the way. No, that's cool. That's cool. Um, we're coming close to time, but
okay,
before we go, I would love for you to take 5 minutes, pitch the book. If you have like a elevator pitch for the book and the campaign, I would love for you to do that for the audience and the
okay.
potential backers.
I'm never particularly good at this stuff, but yeah, I don't know that it's a great book to jump on to if you've not read Killaroo before, but all the back issues are there, and you can buy them separately. So if you buy the new book, and you can buy the origin story, which is Killaroo Scars as well. Read that one first. It gives you a bit of a primer to what the character's about. And there's also obviously the first crossover, so you get to know the characters in this book a bit better in that one. And this is just a continuation on. And if you just like, as we were talking about before, just fun, fun explosions and battle scenes and fights, and all that kind of puerile comic stuff. There's no great message involved in this one. It's just lots of action, lots of splash pages, and a bit of humour thrown in as well. So
Mm.
I think it's a fun ride.
That's awesome. I think that's good enough. Even if you haven't read the back issues, you can definitely grab it for all the action and fighting kangaroos,
Well, that's the
yeah,
thing. I don't think you're going to find too many other comics outside of Tank Girl where you're going to get a talking kangaroo.
see? So you can, if not for anything, grab it for that. And for some Australian humor, I don't mind any amount of Australian humor.
Yeah.
To be honest, like I just absolutely love it. It's so different from rest of the world. We're very self-deprecating, and
Yes.
yeah, we like, as we say in Australia, we like to take a piss on ourselves sometimes. So,
Definitely.
so yeah, yeah, absolutely love all of that. I have Red Scars, and it has some of that, right? As well. So
Awesome.
yeah, back the campaign. And give some more love to this Australian classic. I can call it classic now. It's 20 plus years now. So yeah, so yeah. Thank you for coming on the show, Darren. Really appreciate your time today, and all the best for the next couple of days. Hope we can hit the next stretch goals.